This is horrible code, horrible bourbon.
Welcome to another episode of Bourbon and Breaches, where we cover one of our favorite bourbons and the top 5 most interesting data breaches from the last week. I'm Steve.
Michael.
Shoo.
Nikki.
And that'll be the crew for today. Miguel is taking a leave of absence. He's probably making barbecue in Argentina. So let's jump right into the bourbon. Today's bourbon, we are going to cover Basil Hayden. Basil Hayden is a Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. It's a straight bourbon. And Basil Hayden is a controversial bourbon. So I will start off by saying I enjoy Basil Hayden, but not everything we say today is going to be a glowing review. So let's talk a little bit about Basil Hayden. So Basil Hayden, if we go to their site, you can see their straight bourbon whiskey, and their straight bourbon whiskey is well reviewed. It is also a San Francisco World Spirits Competition double gold winner 2020. So we are continuing on the theme of double gold winners. It is not the cheapest double gold winner. I think we covered that on our last episode with the Evan Williams, but it is a double gold winner. Now, what's interesting for those of you who don't know, which included me for a long time, Basil Hayden is a Jim Beam product. So it is made in the Jim Beam Still House in Claremont, Kentucky. Did you stop by this place, Shu, when you went on the Bourbon Trail?
I did not stop at the Jim Beam facility when I was there.
Missed opportunity. Jim Beam is right down the road from the Four Roses bottling facility, which is an amazing brand that we will have on our show in an upcoming episode.
I wanted to go to Four Roses. I did not.
That also sounds like a missed opportunity. Jim Beam, well-known brand. They also have some lesser-known sub-brands. So if you actually take a look at the inside of this beautiful facility, Knob Creek is one of theirs. But if we go over to our friends at breakingbourbon.com, you can see that Basil Hayden is one of the small batch bourbon collections, including Knob Creek, Baker's, and Booker's. They also make reference to Old Grandad, which I've heard is a great bourbon. I've never had it, but evidently it's supposed to have a similar mash bill to Old Grandad. So I'm going to go ahead and pour this. Again, lovely bourbon, really pretty bottle, a light color. And so we're not dealing with dark ambers. This is more of a light caramel. On the nose, you know, Breaking Bourbon says you're going to get peaches and berries and fruit. I'm really not getting any of that. I do get some oak and a little bit of pepper and orange zest. So I'm getting some of that now. So it's a good sipping bourbon. It's pleasant. It's oak, a little sweet. Maybe I'm getting some of this light vanilla, but I will say that it is noticeably thin, like it says here. So I'm going to put all the tasting notes away. What I'm getting from this, you know, it's an 80 proof and it's smooth. It's a good sipping bourbon. And if it's, you know, at a bar, you're not going to go wrong with it. But it is sort of flat. It's a little monocolor or monotaste. So, you know, I'm enjoying it. It's a good bourbon to have like in the background if you didn't want to really pay attention too closely to the bourbon. But I found maybe it's the proof or maybe it's the mash bill, but I found 1843 and even Evan Williams single barrel to be so much more interesting and sort of captivating as a sipping bourbon. I'm the only one having this today, but Shu, you have a few opinions about Basil Hayden. What do you think of Basil Hayden?
I do have some opinions on Basil Hayden's, and let me share them with you. I've had so Jim Beam, Booker's I think is solid. I think Booker's is very solid. Knob Creek is solid too. So I'm not like just generally down on Jim Beam just for the sake of being down on Jim Beam. Basil Hayden's I would add the flavor profile of water. So yeah, that's how I feel about Basil Hayden's. I was not a fan. I've had it probably about 3 or 4 times. So I'm not drinking Basil Hayden's today.
It is a pretty bottle. I appreciate
bottle.
I appreciate their marketing. Until today, I assumed that it was some sort of craft bourbon producer. I did not assume that it was Jim Beam. They don't mention Jim Beam anywhere on the bottle. So kudos to them for at least attempting to make a brand that is distinct. I do notice it's a little watery. And it's kind of weird because I've had 80 proof bourbons before that had a thicker mouthfeel. So I don't know what the cause of that is. I like it. I enjoy it. Clearly I got it, and I'm on the last few sips of it. So I would buy it again, but it's one of those bourbons that if I could buy Evan Williams or 1843 instead, those are both cheaper and for me more interesting. So it's not going to be my first pick.
Yeah, I agree. I was not a fan of the taste. I thought it was very, very bland. And you're right, there's a lot of better bourbons at that price point. And if you want more exciting and better tasting bourbons, you definitely go cheaper and achieve that.
I don't feel like the San Francisco World Spirit Competition double gold winner list has done us wrong. I think they earned their medal. I just think that they are in a class of bourbon producers that have a lot of very interesting flavors. And this one just sort of hits right in the middle. Nikki, tell us what you're wearing and drinking today.
Okay, let's carve off some time for first the shirt. This is Ramen Tatsuya, local Austin ramen spot. And the bourbon is Bardstown, which I had mentioned in a previous episode. And now that I have the bottle in front of me, can confirm is distilled in Bardstown, Kentucky.
Nice.
Spoiler alert, I'm not a big fan of it.
Oh no. Well,
it's great for old fashions.
What do we do with bottles we don't like? Because I've got like 5 of those that I've just been sitting on. I don't want to cover them.
You just suck it up and drink them.
Oh no. There's so many good bourbons. There's no room in life for bad bourbon.
When it's like 11 or 12 o'clock at night and you're coding and you're hating life and depressed and just want to get drunk, just pour the bad bourbon.
Do we need to review your code and specifically code checked in after midnight?
This is horrible code, horrible bourbon.
Speaking of horrible code, I think we're going to see some of that in this episode. Nikki, what do we have for story number 1?
Nissan source code leaked after it used admin as both username and password. Nissan's source code was leaked because of a misconfigured Git server on the company. And information that was leaked was is basically source code on the mobile app, market research tools, diagnostics tools, data assets. There was a lot going on. And you guys had actually brought this story up because it was just so stupid. Now that we're here live, what are your thoughts on it?
I mean, anybody who thinks that this story is unique and that other companies, some of whom are laughing at Nissan right now, don't have some of their source code in exposed repositories with admin or some version of admin, you're wrong. This is much more common than it appears, and Nissan just got caught with their pants down.
Yeah, I would say the article was a little light on details, but it referenced the quote shadow IT problem, where it basically says that outside of standard security processes in your organization, some developer installs some tool somewhere, and yeah, and it doesn't adhere to any sort of review or anything within the organization, and thus it was exposed. So I feel like one of the things that Nissan could have done to mitigate this is not create an environment where your developers have to throw up random servers somewhere. That's one of the key things here.
I mean, it's laughable to use admin as username and password. I think they either used an appliance, an off-the-shelf instance that had GitHub or had other Git installed, and they didn't read the instructions that said, hey, make sure you change the password and probably a username as well.
Second story we'll be covering, headline reads, 70 terabytes of Parler users' messages, videos, and posts leaked by security researchers. Big news last week, swept the country. Everybody was watching while they were working from home. Basically, Parler, a social network used to plan the storming of the US Capitol last week, has been hit by a massive data scrape. Security researchers collected swaths of user data before the network went dark Monday morning after Amazon, Google, and Apple booted the platform. What are y'all's thoughts on this in terms of privacy part of it? What do you guys think?
Privacy. Look, if you were storming the Capitol and you live streamed yourself to Parler and somebody indexed it so they can find you later, good. I hope you said your name and address too.
Good. Like, I'm glad they don't call them hackers because no one hacked Parler. Someone looked around. Well, okay, so the most interesting part of the story is Parler had a vulnerability in how they wrote their 2FA that enabled someone to make an admin account. So wrap your head around that. They implemented multi-factor so poorly that you could make an admin account. You should never be able to make an admin account. If you don't have separate sign up processes for admins versus everyone else, like that's shame on you. And then to think that they tried to implement security and they only introduced a security vulnerability, like they're not working with the best code here. And the fact that the data that people were deleting was not actually being deleted. I mean, that's what everyone does. Like nothing goes away. Snapchat doesn't actually delete your selfies. They just move them off somewhere else. Or maybe they do. Don't sue us. But but I mean, don't trust anyone to actually delete things they say that they delete. So like, yeah, some security researcher was able to get an admin account, but is it hacking? Like, not really. Maybe.
No, not at all. I want to emphasize that too. This was not hacking. This was the researcher said that they basically scraped public information that was available. Creating an admin account, that's even kind of a stretch as to what they needed to do. Ours actually kind of went more into detail on what happened, and they talked about things like the authentication scheme was easily bypassed, like you said, and even a lot of information didn't require authentication. You just get it. So they didn't do any throttling requests. Incremental IDs. They implemented incremental IDs. Again, this is like the second week in a row we've talked about this. Don't use ID 1, ID 2, ID 3. So yeah, this was not a very sophisticated hack. It was not a very sophisticated scrape is what it basically was. I think the most important thing to take out of this was it turns out that they did not scrub GPS data also from the photos and videos. So if you're a user and you post, you're posting a Parler of like your dog, and then you post another video of you storming the Capitol, it's very easily correlated here.
Ready for number 3? Widely used software company may be entry point for huge US hacking. Russian hackers may have piggybacked on a tool developed by JetBrains, which is based in the Czech Republic, to gain access to federal government and private sector systems in the United States. This is a story that keeps on giving. I think we've covered it 3 episodes in a row and in a span of 5 weeks or so. You guys have more informational tidbits to share. What do you got?
JetBrains. I've not used TeamCity before, which is the tool implicated in this, but JetBrains makes excellent developer products.
I do not use JetBrains products, but I've tried them in the past and they seemed pretty okay. And I know a big chunk of our team uses them. But didn't they deny it? So they were accused and then they denied it.
Yeah, they did.
Who accused them?
I don't know if anyone officially accused them. What happened with the reporting and the FBI said that that TeamCity, which is a code build tool, an automated code build tool, may have been used in this process.
You used for development, because like Sublime Text is supporting like 12 ransomware gangs just by existing. I mean, you can't blame a developer tool for being good.
Yeah,
like that's blaming HD Moore, who's here in Austin. Like, so Metasploit is used by hackers around the world, but that like no one blames HD Moore for making Metasploit.
No, you're essentially right. This the SolarWinds attack has been described as a supply chain attack, and the TeamCity is just the chain in the supply chain, right? So the attackers use the SolarWinds keys. They had to get the keys and then used it to sign code. They may have used JetBrains for this, but a similarity may be if someone steals your key to break into your house and steal your TV. Are you going to blame the lock? Or are you going to blame the door? No, you're going to blame you losing the key. So
K8. I'm going to blame K8. I'm going to blame them damn Kubernetes.
Bastard Kubernetes is great.
those Kubernetes are to blame. Breaking into my house and stealing my TV.
Freaking Kubernetes, man. They're blameless and everything, I swear.
So
JetBrains has denied this. They've denied that they have said that they are unaware of any security vulnerabilities, which may or may not be true. So yeah, this may be a situation where they're just a chain in a supply chain.
Well, we've got a resident supply chain risk expert on the cast. Mike, what do you think of all this?
Nothing that you guys haven't said. Look, there are a lot of tools that are widely used. They're used by everybody in their stack. It's not necessarily incumbent on the third party. It's incumbent on the third party to do everything within their power to prevent abuse. But there are things outside of outside of their power as well. And that's the long and short of it. You know, if it's a specific issue that affects customers, Salesforce, for instance, almost every best in breed sales stack is built in and uses Salesforce. They had an API error last year that exposed customers and customers' data. It's incumbent on them not to happen. They make a heavy investment in security so that doesn't happen. But it's really tough when you get to tools that are essentially in themselves marketplaces, you know, where other third parties are going to build on top of them to get into a stack. So stuff happens.
I think SolarWinds is turning into the poster child of third-party risk. SolarWinds used by 18,000 companies, at least 10 government organizations that have admitted to it. And hackers broke into one company, SolarWinds, and they were able to get access to 18,000. It's the case in point, the supply chain attack. And I think the fact that they're trying to trace the chain and trace it to include JetBrains some way, somehow. I think this is just showing everyone how critical third-party risk is. If you don't care who your vendors are, and if you aren't incredibly protective about how you interact with your vendors and how you monitor your vendors, you're in for a rough ride. So,
and then it comes down to what you've shared or what network connections, you know, are actually available is where I'm going with that. So you can't. This is not an if proposition. This is a when proposition. And so, you know, the best practice is to understand and have plans to mitigate issues. But there are some folks that are so critical that it would be difficult to mitigate depending on how critical they are to you, and that's very tough.
I think this goes back to zero trust. You have to have vendors, but you have to also not trust them. We have vendors that we use daily that we do not trust. We have deletion policies. We don't put anything sensitive on those vendors in preparation for a data breach that we just expect. And I think you have to think about it that way. People are often surprised how often very well-known companies are breached. You know, we keep track of that stuff here at Act Notice. Facebook last year had like 6, 7, 8 different vulnerabilities they disclosed. Same thing with Twitter. You know, the well-known companies that spend a lot on security disclose a lot of breaches that you never hear about in the news. And so you have to be incredibly careful with whatever information you're sharing with a third party. You're going to use third parties, but you need to sort of plan out your policy for them before you start giving them all your information.
Yeah, let's assume that JetBrains' statement that they are essentially not at fault is true. It goes back to SolarWinds losing the key and SolarWinds not securing their Team City instance to allow this happen. They could have done more to basically set up Team Cities to assume that anyone has the key should have the key, and if this was an attack, then they trusted the key implicitly, and they could have done more to prevent this.
New Zealand Central Bank says data system hacked, sensitive information potentially accessed.
I mean, banks get hacked every day. So I think this was noteworthy because it was the New Zealand Reserve Bank. It was actually the government's central bank. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, central bank.
So that's bad.
Pretty bad.
But then again, government agencies get hacked every day. And I think the Federal Reserve was included in SolarWinds. I can't say for sure.
The two things I highlighted from this article were the sentence, A third-party file sharing service used by the Reserve Bank of New Zealand to share and store sensitive information has been illegally accessed. And the second sentence I highlighted was the bank declined to answer emailed questions seeking more details. So from a technical standpoint, you could let your imagination run wild. Maybe it's Box, maybe it's Dropbox. Smart Money says it's misconfigured Amazon S3 instance. Who knows? So
Yeah, this this is not a good event, but we don't know enough to know how bad it is, and it is not, the Central Bank of New Zealand is not a common vendor, and I, even if all of their information was stolen, that would make for an incredibly interesting, Panama Papers, to see what sort of government dealings the country of New Zealand has. But I don't see the attack vector here. You could steal money from the country of New Zealand. You could try to commit fraud. You could. I think it would have been much more damaging if the hackers had deployed ransomware. I think this headline would have been much more interesting if it said Central Bank of New Zealand no longer exists due to ransomware. Like, that would have been way scarier. Like,
that would
just,
be very, very bad.
yeah, just a hacker like poking around. I it's bad, but it's not inherently like the world is ending bad. So I mean, central banks need to be very careful because they manage the money. But otherwise, I guess this is TBD, right? We don't know how bad this is until they tell us more.
Number 5, headline reads, Russian hackers sentenced to 12 years in prison for involvement in massive network intrusions at U.S. financial institutions, brokerage firms, a major news publication, and other companies.
For Christ's sake, Steve, get it together.
This guy, he's the problem.
Andre Tiarin had been sentenced to 12 years after being extradited from Georgia after he was found guilty for committing all sorts of online internet fraud, conspiracy, phishing, all of that. And he's being sentenced to 12 years after making $19 million in proceeds over all of his illegal activities online. What are your thoughts?
That is more than $1 million a year, and it's in Bitcoin, so it's probably going to appreciate. So I know a lot of people that would take that deal. Plus, who's jailing him? Russia or the U.S.?
The U.S. The U.S. extradited him back in like 2018.
Yeah.
And he had been waiting for trial.
I mean, good behavior. He could get out in half the time. So I've been watching a lot of The Wire. So he's one inside informant away from cutting his time in half.
And not condoning anything, but clearly, I think the point here is to keep in mind that a lot of this crime is financially motivated. That might seem self-evident, but most people are worried about APT. They're worried about politically motivated crime. People go after third parties to get your data, and they go after you because they're chasing low-hanging fruit for a buck. And the ones that do it successfully are quite successful indeed. And I think that this just shows how financially motivated you can be, where the sentence might be worth the take.
There's a lot of people that go to jail for 12 years that didn't make $19 million. And I assume the US was not successful in seizing the 19 million. I assume that 19 million exists in a Bitcoin wallet somewhere. And he has memorized the activation key.
Also, along with what you guys are saying, I would highly suspect that he's the fall guy in this, that there are other people behind him that convince him to take the hit for benefits of himself and his family. So yeah, I agree. I think there's something deeper in this, and he's just kind of the low-hanging fruit in all this. And also, it should be noted that a lot of these stories you hear, we don't know which bear he is a part of, and
Never
and
mentioned.
yeah, we never know. We don't know which bear he was part of, and also yeah, I remember what I was going to say. Most of these stories that we hear that when Russian hackers do, if they even get arrested, we usually don't hear that they're even caught. This gentleman was arrested in Georgia. Usually, what happens is that
To clarify, the country of Georgia.
The country of Georgia, not like the
not Savannah.
not
he wasn't.
Savannah,
He
not
wasn't
Georgia.
vacationing in Savannah, Georgia.
Right. He wasn't a
The destination of Russian hackers.
No, not like Kennesaw State, Georgia. So most of the stories that we hear, I'm actually surprised he got arrested, because what usually happens is that they just go somewhere within the vast country of Russia and disappear, and they never get caught. So,
well, that's been an episode of Bourbon and Breaches. If you enjoyed what you saw today, please like, subscribe, and comment. Oh boy, you should comment. And if you have a bourbon that you want us to cover, please comment and let us know. If you have a breach you want us to cover, please also comment and let us know. Until next time, cheers.